Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. My name is Alison, the online piano and violin tutor. If the violin is shaking when you're trying to do vibrato, that is the number one sign that you are attempting vibrato too soon. Number one, the first thing you're going to need is a violin. I have been playing the violin since I was 4 years old. I went to university and graduated with a Bachelor of Arts degree in music.
With the amazing talent that's Alison Sparrow. Alison, come out here.
So bear with me if there are any technical hitches, I'm sure it'll be fine. For about 5 years I was an examiner for the London College of Music. And over the years I've seen basically the music world from every kind of possible view really, and because of that it has enabled me to write my own violin course. Hello everyone, well, so there we go, that's kind of all you really need to know. And don't forget guys, anyone can learn to play the violin. And I've just realised I've said that entire thing without any sound. That's a good start. So I just said that, yes, my hair has gone black. I've been black, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years ago. You'll see videos, old videos from my channel. Can you all hear me now? Hopefully you can all hear me now. So I'll wait till someone comments. You should be able to hear me. Everything's coming through. So yes, so that's that. And if I am just looking like I'm a little bit dressed up, then I am. It's because we're going out to dinner after this and I won't have time to get changed. So yes, hello, and ignore the first 1 minute of that one. I actually had no sound. So let's go straight into it. I don't have that many questions actually sitting around here on my phone because I managed to get through everything last week. So I'm hoping you guys have got some questions for me. Otherwise, this is going to be like the shortest stream in the history of streams. So Belle LaBelle at the top of the chat has asked, I have an Artino practice mute and it works great in muting the sound, but the problem is that the mute blocks my view to see if I'm bowing straight or not. Do you know which smaller mute would work the best? So mutes are sort of a bit of a funny thing, and I think some of you use mutes very differently to how you should use mutes. I don't actually have a mute sitting there. 1 second. I lied. I do have a mute. I didn't actually think I had one. So this is the mute that I've got. I mean, I have no idea what this is. This is just a very, very old mute that I've had. So two different sort of types of mute that you can get. You can get these mutes that actually mute the violin of the sound. I'll explain a little bit more in a second. And then you've got other ones that are sort of practice mutes. I don't have one, so I'll show you what I mean. And they are these ones, like the bigger ones. So this is just I don't know, a bunch of mutes from Amazon, as you can see. So the bigger ones, these ones, I don't know why there's two of them. The bigger ones are your practice mutes, and then the smaller ones that look like, you know, the little black wine gums, those are these ones. So the difference between the two is that a practice mute, and I don't have one to demonstrate with, a practice mute is going to be a mute that's going to really dampen the sound for you. So they do what they say on the tin, really. They just mute the sound. So a lot of people are practicing in flats, or they've got neighbours next door, I don't know, whatever reason, or they're practicing somewhere where they don't want anyone else to hear them, etc., etc. Because let's be face it, the violin is it is a very loud violin. So you can use a practice mute for that reason, to dull down the sound, to soften down the sound, physically take the decibels of the violin down. However, I don't really like practicing with them. I don't like students practicing with them if they don't have to practice with them, because they mute the sound. they can end up muting your intonation a little bit. Because they're muting the sound, they're kind of taking away the sound of the violin, which helps you learn and helps you progress. So only use those if if you absolutely have to. I think if you don't have to, don't use them. But as Belle the Bell said, they're restricting her vision. So obviously she's got one on here, and it's so thick and it's so high. I'm imagining that they've got where is it on Amazon? Sorry, I've lost it. So I'm imagining they're talking about one of those bigger ones that you've got there that are going to be obstructing the view. So they're going to be sitting there, and then when they're playing, they just can't see anything. So the difference is that, let me turn it down just a tiny bit. So this is the violin without the mute. And then with the mute on, let me just show you what that looks like actually. So that is what an actual mute should be like. Now, this type of mute is for playing purposes. When the music is telling you to be con sordino, which is our Italian for mute, that is what it means. So now it sounds... So to be perfectly honest, I think that it actually does give you a good, nice, quieter sound, because it does dampen the sound. But so that piece by Boccherini is designed to be played with a mute. If I play it without... and then with... So the mute does give it a much more muted sound. It's taking away the ringiness of the violin. But I think if you want to do that, just use one of these little ones. But these little ones are designed for doing that. And then when you're not using them, you can just keep them on the violin. You can just keep them on the strings kind of there. And then when you go to put it on, you just hook the little rubber piece over. So you can easily flip sort of between the two. So if you want a mute to dampen the sound, those ultra practice mutes are really good. I think there is an actual brand called Ultra Practice Mute. So if you get one of them, they're maybe not going to be quite so bulky, but yeah. So that's that with mutes. I don't normally keep this on because I'll just end up losing it. And to be quite frank, I don't really use it that much. Okay. Josh Wallace says, any advice on playing slurs? Okay, can you elaborate a little bit on that, and then I can get back to you and answer your question. Hi Gilbert, hi Tessa, hi Donald, Nicholas. Nice to see you all. Okay, Nicholas has a question about the left hand thumb position. I'm really struggling with not holding onto the fingerboard. Any suggestions? So there are two places that you can hold your thumb on the fingerboard. Obviously, we're talking about left hand here. So the way I teach is that I teach you to hold with the pad of your thumb. There are two sort of different ways of holding the violin, depending on the teacher that you're being taught from. Both ways are absolutely fine. Both ways are correct. It really doesn't matter. Nobody is right. Nobody is wrong. It just depends on what you feel is right. To be quite honest with you, I can't really remember how my teacher taught me to hold the violin. Maybe they taught me a little bit differently, and then over the years I've just, developed what's kind of best for me. But the way I play and the way I teach is to have your thumb here. So I hold with the pad of my thumb there, and then my fingers are just holding over like this. Does that sort of make sense? Can you see that? So my thumb is it's almost bent, and my thumb is almost holding up. It's almost holding up. Let me do it that way because you can't see it that way. My thumb is holding up. So can you see it's bent? The other way that people hold, or the other way that people can hold the violin as well, is more in this kind of bit. So the violin is going, or the neck of the violin is going into there. Rather than holding with the pad of the the violin is going into there. So they will hold more like this. So their thumb, that way. So their thumb is sticking up and then their fingers are curving round. A lot of people actually find that quite difficult. I actually find that quite difficult. But if you're holding like that, your fingers are at least bent round. They are at least, it does encourage them to bend over a lot more. And if you're doing that, then you're going to be doing more, arm vibrato, because you're gripping from the thumb here, so you have no choice but to have the whole arm and the whole hand go with it. Whereas when you're holding like this, so your thumb is almost the thumb, you nearly went flying there, where the thumb is almost holding up the violin, the neck of the violin, then you're going to be doing more finger vibrato, for example, because you can see there's, I'm not touching anything. So whereas here my whole hand is kind of touching the fingerboard, and here it isn't. So I think if you're talking about thumb support, make sure your thumb is maybe a little bit more underneath, so that it's more holding up, like you were putting pushing your thumb into something. So maybe make sure your thumb is holding it up. But if your thumb is sort of out to the side and it's slipping up, then you're going to be a bit of a halfway house maybe. So hopefully that has answered your question. If it hasn't, I'm sorry. I'll ask it again. Rebecca, you always look amazing when you stream. Oh, thank you. Okay. Music in box. Interesting name. What advice would you give for students playing in an orchestra? What do you sort of mean? Can you be a little bit more specific if you're still here and you're watching? What do you sort of mean in reference to that? Hi Mel, first time joining, lovely to have you here. JC, how much should a beginner practice? What would you recommend? Okay, I don't know what kind of beginner you are, what kind of level you are, but for example, if you have just started out, let's say you've just got hold of your violin a couple of weeks ago, and you're literally just starting out on lessons. It depends kind of what you're working on, but if you're starting as a very, very, very beginner, I would probably say about 30 minutes to practice with what you are going to be learning, which isn't going to be a huge amount. There's only going to be small amounts because you're going to be learning in kind of increments. If you were following my course, for example, I was just thinking, I don't have what I need here, but if you were following my course, for example, I've got little exercises that you play through. I'm just seeing if I can find those now, but I can't for now. But the exercises that I teach as part of my course are just kind of little one-liner exercises, and you're going to be learning sort of one block of them at a time. If you're learning from a teacher, then again, they're not going to be giving you very much to do. So I would probably say about 30 minutes. I wouldn't really want to go less than 30 minutes because I just think it's a little bit like when you do exercise. If you go running or you're rowing or doing whatever it is that you're doing, you want to be doing at least 25 30 minutes really of exercise to get your heart rate up and to make your body kind of actually go into fat burning mode. If you're doing anything less than 30 minutes, then you're not really giving your body enough chance to kind of get into that sort of zone to burn any calories and weight and things like that. So I'd say about 30 minutes. If you are beginner but you've been playing for, I don't know, anywhere between sort of 3 and 6 months, then you're going to be doing a little bit more. So maybe you're probably going to be doing some exercises or some little pieces, something like that, some simple pieces, and maybe some scales and arpeggios and that kind of thing. Then I would probably suggest that you play for, I don't know, maybe 45 minutes, something like that. I'd say when you get to kind of intermediate level, so if you're doing intermediate level, then you would be maybe playing some exercises, different kind of bowing exercises or exercises to help with techniques, maybe that kind of thing. You would be doing a whole bunch of technical work like scales and arpeggios, and also you would be doing some pieces, maybe 2 or 3 pieces, something like that. Then you probably may want to be kind of practicing for around about an hour, because that's probably going to take you to about an hour. So those are kind of rough timings, but again, it completely depends on what level you are and what you're going to be doing. But I would say roughly, I'm thinking back, I'm thinking to what I would be giving my students at those kind of levels. So 30 minutes if you're a complete beginner, maybe 45 minutes if you're sort of a beginner, but you've been playing for a few months. And then if you're kind of more intermediate level, then you're probably going to be looking about an hour, because that's how long it's going to take you to sort of get through everything and get work done anyway. Maybe, a little bit more. So hopefully that helps you. Robert says, any tips for intonation? So yes, the best thing for intonation is scales. It always comes back to scales. Scales solve a multitude of problems and techniques. We've always done scales, and there's a good reason that we always do scales. And it's not just the violin, it's everything. For the piano, for example, we're not really worried about the intonation with the piano, because every time we put a finger down on the key, you want to put a finger on an A, you're going to be playing an A. So we're not worried about intonation for that. But the piano is a very large instrument. So there's 88 keys on a full-size piano, and we're using all 10 fingers at the same time. Whereas we're not, obviously, on the violin, we're just using 4 at any one time, and then our thumb is holding up the violin. So when you're playing the piano, scales and arpeggios are great for the dexterity. They're great for you working your way around the instrument, getting up and down the instrument. On the violin, also it will help you with some dexterity, moving up and down the fingerboard, but it's going to help you with the intonation as well, because everybody knows the sound of a scale. So it's like saying everybody knows how the song Happy Birthday goes, or everybody knows how the song Jingle Bells goes. So because you know what a scale is like, it's one note in front of the other, it's very easy to pick out your intonation. So if you were playing a G major scale, you can hear that something doesn't sound right there. So you're not putting your fingers in the right place, because it just doesn't sound right. So, you can go back and correct it. So scales are very good for doing that, because they take a lot of thought out of things. The last thing you want to be doing is having a look at sheet music and trying to work on intonation at the same time. So the good thing about scales as well is that once we've learned a scale, we've learned a scale. So we're not physically looking at any sheet music. We're not looking at any notes. I don't know, something like this. We're not having to look at something like this, and we're trying to work out intonation at the same time. So the best way to get around intonation and get good at intonation is to know your scales and the technical work that goes with it. The better you are at scales, the better your intonation. The better you are at the scales, the better you are at knowing what key everything is. The better you are at scales, the better everything you'll be. The key has always, it always is, and it always has been scales. Okay, let's move on. Okay, I don't want to miss anything. Rebecca, I've had the bad habit of sticking my non-playing fingers too far away from the strings. Do you mean when you're talking about if you're playing, your fingers are sort of sticking up in the air? I mean, that doesn't really matter as long as they go down at the right time. But I mean, sometimes I'll have sometimes I'll have fingers all over the show. It doesn't really matter. I don't really care about that. I just don't care what people think. That doesn't matter to me as long as my fingers are going down at the time they should be going down. That's it, really. That's all that matters to me. I don't know what it's like when you're playing the saxophone. Maybe your fingers are used to coming up and down off the keys, but if it's not causing you any problems, then I really wouldn't worry about it. It's just a transference of techniques, isn't it? But if it doesn't cause you any problems on the violin and your fingers are still going down in the place that they should be at the right time, then it doesn't really matter. It's just one of those things that you've obviously been playing the saxophone far longer than you have on the violin, so I wouldn't particularly worry about it. Okay. Music in box. To be specific, how would one improve rhythm within the context of an orchestra? Okay, so I think really it's just knowing your own personal parts. When you're playing with an orchestra, you've got two different types of things going on. You need to know the music that you are actually playing. So if this piece of sheet music here was something that you were playing as part of an orchestra and you were in violin 2 or violin 1, whatever it is, whatever section that they've put you in, and this is your particular part to learn, really you need to make sure, or you would be expected to go away, take the music home and work on your part. playing in an orchestra is no different to playing on your own, because when you're playing the violin on your own, eventually at some point you're either going to be playing with a backing track, an MP3 backing track, or depending on what kind of circumstance you're in, you'll be playing with a live pianist. So the violin, even though the violin is kind of a solo instrument, all instruments really are designed to be played with an orchestra, with an MP3 backing, obviously for modern day, another instrument, a woodwind instrument or a string quartet or something like that, or a piano. So whenever you're playing something on the violin, you're going to be accompanied with a backing track. But that doesn't matter whether you're playing with a piano person or an MP3 backing track, or you're playing with an orchestra. So in terms of rhythm, there's nothing really specific with an orchestra that would make the answer to that kind of question any different. I would just say that you would be expected to learn your part as it is. So if that was what you had to do, that's what you had to do. And then what happens is the conductor would count you all in, 1, 2, 3, and then everybody would play. And hopefully the point is that if everybody's got their parts nailed down correctly, when everybody plays at the same time as the conductor tells everybody to, they're all going to be playing the same thing and the parts that they're supposed to be doing. And then it's just up to the conductor to then just make sure that everybody is just playing cohesively and not just kind of one section's going off and doing whatever it is that they're doing. So that's it really. I hope I've answered that question, but it doesn't really matter whether you're playing in an orchestra or whether you're playing with a live pianist rather, or an MP3 backing track. Getting the hang of the rhythm is still going to be, it would still be the same answer. Right. Josh, so not really sure how to word it. My fingers move too fast. I think my problem is playing the right note at the right time. I can put a video up. So, okay, I know what you mean here. And I know a lot of you have this problem. It's a problem between, when you're doing, when you do this and then you're doing that as well. And it's really difficult to kind of do that because your brain, when you're trying to tap your head and then your hand is doing that. Hands are doing different things. So what is generally happening is that the bow arm is moving at one speed and your fingers are moving at another speed. So you're perhaps doing... So you're getting that delay with the fingers. So what's happening is that the bow is moving faster than the fingers are responding to. And I think that's a right-hand person's problem. So I am right-handed and I play with my bow in the right hand. FYI, going off on a tangent, it doesn't matter whether you are playing right-handed or left-handed. I think there are pros and cons for both. If you're predominantly left-hand and you want to play with a violin the other way round, then that's absolutely fine. If you want the bow to be your dominant hand, then just swap everything over. Obviously, you do need a left-handed violin because you can't just take a right-handed violin or I'm going to call it a right-handed violin and kind of just swap the hands over. It doesn't work that way. But if you are playing with the bow being your dominant hand, then it is just a case of your bow moving too fast because that is your dominant hand and your fingers are being left behind. Now, the only way to get around that is to do very slow practice and build that up. So if you're working on a particular passage that is quite troublesome in that kind of way, then you just want to be doing it slowly and building up. So I don't know, I'm just going to take a scale as an example. Let me just turn that down a little bit. So if I got even faster, then it would be my bow would be moving too fast for my fingers. So let me see if I can just do it ridiculously fast and sort of show you. So I can hear there's a very slight delay there. If I recorded that back and slowed it down, it would be absolutely horrendous. So what I would need to do is just... keep playing that over and over and over and over and over. Obviously, that's not a very good example because I'm just playing a one octave D major scale. But if you're talking about a piece of music or a passage that is particularly tricky in a piece of music, then you just need to practice that passage over and over. Or if it's a whole piece, then you need to slow that piece down. The bow hand is going to be working faster than the fingers, because generally, I mean, my left hand is much weaker than my right hand. It's almost as if it needs to be the other way around, really. But then if that was the case, my right hand fingers would be moving like anything, and then my bow arm would be sluggish. So I think in some terms I would still have a slurred or a delayed effect, but it would just be a sort of a different way round. So the only way to get rid of a delayed effect is just to do practice slowly and build that up until you get it up to the speed that you want to get it up to. It also helps the fingers warm up a little bit as well. But yeah, that's kind of the only way around that. I know a lot of people have a problem with that kind of slur or that sort of delay. Okay, what else have we got? Vinci, hi Alison, what are your thoughts and advice with outdoor performances, specifically being in hot summer or colder winter temperatures? Don't do them. I don't like playing outside. I don't mind. I mean, to be perfectly honest, I mean, the British weather, I mean, it's a joke, really, isn't it? It's either really hot or it's just really cold, and there's not really an awful lot in between, or it's just chucking it down with rain. I think if you're somewhere like if you're somewhere in California where it's really, really hot, or Miami's really hot, Mexico is very hot and humid. I've taken violins to Mexico before to film some videos for this channel, and it's been an utter nightmare. I'll admit I've not taken this because this is my very, very expensive antique violin, so I won't take this, because if I do, all the glue will probably loosen up and it'll just end up a mess. But even with cheaper violins that I've taken, because I don't want them being damaged by the airlines and things like that, tuning is a nightmare. There isn't really anything that you can do about it, really. If it's really, really cold, I find that I just physically can't play because my fingers just won't move. So I don't like playing. I just if a wedding has been outside, I've always kind of tried to get myself inside, because I know I just can't play because it's just too cold, or you're just playing for much shorter periods of time. But also, the violin doesn't have too much of a problem in coldness. The violin doesn't like heat. So I remember at the very end of one of I think it was my first or second live stream that I did a few months ago now, and there was a massive, I don't know if anyone noticed, there was a massive click at the end of one of the videos. I'd literally just said goodbye to everybody. I heard a massive ping. I think it might have been my second live string. Right at the very end, there was a massive ping. I turned around and my G string had, of all strings, it was the G, which is nearly £100 to rebuy. It was my G string that had gone, because it's just the extreme heat. So where I am, I've got one of these little cabin things, and they can get quite hot in the summer. Plus, we were going through a bit of a heat wave, so it must have been around August time. So yeah, the violin doesn't really like heat because it just doesn't. The strings just don't like it. But in terms of what you can do, there isn't really anything. There isn't really kind of anything that you can do with that. Just try and just stay out of those kind of heats, or just in short periods of time. But I just find that the strings unwind themselves, especially gut strings. Never ever have gut strings in the summer. That's one rule that I have. Don't have gut strings in the summer, because I've lived and learned, and the gut strings just unwind themselves. Once they unwind and you're retuning them, they just don't like it. They have a bit of an epi fit, and then they don't like it. So I just stay away from gut in the summer. Okay. Let's have a look. BVS. I can't seem to hold the instrument secure with my chin, no matter the attachment used. How to fix this? Without seeing you, it's very difficult for me to comment, but have you tried a shoulder rest? Have you tried maybe taking this off? Have you tried putting a cloth over this? Have you tried putting a sponge underneath, or a cloth underneath that? You can wrap those yellow dusters, put them under there, or you can wrap a yellow duster under here. Fold it up a few times rather, and you can put an elastic band on this part here, and then you can attach it to the button there. There are various different things that you probably need to try. If it's not that, then maybe try and adjust how your hand here is holding it up. Maybe you're just not pushing into your neck enough. And by pushing into your neck, I don't mean that you should physically push into your neck so that it's hurting. If I do that, it's going to hurt the platysma muscle that I've got there. So I don't want to be doing that. But I am, the violin is secure in my neck. The violin's not going anywhere, and then my chin is clamping down. So again, without seeing you, I can't comment too much. But hopefully, I don't know, those few little bits might help you there. Hi, Bea. Nice to see you again. Bea, hello from PA. I was playing yesterday for my co-workers, and although I was less nervous than last time, I was still nervous. This led me to make silly mistakes. Do the nerves decrease with time? No. Unfortunately, no, they do not. But one thing that you can do, this is a really, really good question, I think. One thing that you can do to get rid of as many nerves as possible is that you don't want to be nervous playing. So you don't want to be nervous of mistakes. You don't want to be nervous of, oh my God, what if it goes wrong? And what if I do this? And what if I can't do that bit at bar 9 or anything? You don't want to be nervous of anything that's going to happen. But having natural anxiety of playing in front of people, that's completely normal, and that will never go away. I think that something like that will only go away if you're doing it day in, day out, day in, day out. And even then, talking in front of co-workers, performing in front of friends. Performing in front of friends and family is probably more nerve-wracking, isn't it, than actual people that you don't know, because friends and family are like, they're sitting there judging your every movement. And even though none of them play a musical instrument, it's fascinating how everybody becomes a professional at the violin, isn't it? So you don't want to be nervous about any music that you're playing. So when you're learning a piece of music, as I said to you last week, I think I remember saying this as well because it came up again, you want to make sure that you practice so that you never make any mistakes. So a lot of people just practice so that they don't, they don't want to make any mistakes, but professionals will keep going until they don't make any mistakes in it. So you don't want to be nervous about anything that's coming up. What you do want to be nervous about is just the anxiety of just playing in front of people. But that's only going to come from playing and playing and playing and playing. It's good, actually, to play in front of people. So when my students were coming up to their exams, so we have exams in the UK. So when my students were maybe a month away from taking their one of their graded exams, I would insist, or sometimes I would even get some people into the room during their lesson in certain circumstances, but I would insist that they do a sort of a little mini concert in front of their mum and dad in a more kind of formal kind of setting, because that can really show up any mistakes that you're going to make. So for example, it uncovers a lot of things that you didn't realize that were there. And it's very uncomfortable to do this. I get it. It's very, very nerve-wracking, but think of it as an exercise for you, not for something to them to listen to. You are using them to help you identify any mistakes that you've got going on. And I'm telling you, the minute you can play this piece through 100 times and it'll be absolutely perfect. The second you play it in front of someone, you can completely fall apart. So playing in front of people gives you a really good indication of, actually, are you as good as you thought you were? Could that bit there that you thought you'd nailed, have you really nailed it? Because it puts the pressure on you. But if you can play it under pressure, then you're going to have nailed it. So that's what I used to do with my students, get them to play performances, and then they would kind of come back and tell me what they thought and how they thought it kind of went. So it just puts the wind up you a little bit. But practice is the key. You've just got to keep practicing until you never get it wrong. Don't practice until you get it right. Practice until you never get it wrong. Then at least when you're presented with playing in front of co-workers or friends, family, people, audience, whatever, you're only going to be nervous of the actual event and not nervous of any particular parts that may or may not go wrong. Okay. Mark Savigny, first time here. Hello, nice to have you with us. Okay. Any other questions that we've got? Which piece is easier as a beginner? Silent Night, or Let It Snow? I want to play one of these songs for Christmas on stage, and I have less time on hand right now. I would probably say Silent Night is a nice easy one. Have you got my shameless plug club coming up here? Have you got my Christmas and Holiday Violin Book 1? Silent Night is in here. Where is it? This book comes with 10 traditional Christmas and holiday pieces, and it comes with bespoke backing tracks that I have made with my own fair hands. So there's nothing like this anywhere else. Silent Night is page 12. Hold on. So this is Silent Night from my little book, and I would say that it's quite easy. I think Let It Snow. I don't have Let It Snow in here, but Let It Snow is probably a little bit more complicated with the rhythm and probably the key that it's in. But Silent Night is definitely probably the easier one because there's not much going on with it. So if you had to choose between the two, go for Silent Night. And if you haven't already, or if you're interested in learning some easy Christmas music before Christmas, then I'll put a link to it underneath the video. But I've got my Christmas and holiday book here, 100% downloadable, nothing physical to send. So as soon as you buy it, you've got it. It's $12, 10 pieces. They come with tab music as well, and they've all got bespoke backing tracks. So what's not to love there? Okay, a few more before we finish. Mark Savigny, I have yet to find a shoulder rest that works for me. I've tried many, thought about playing without one. I mean, why not? Have you tried? Hold on, before I just destroy my entire office area. Have you tried this one? The Wolf Forte Primo shoulder rest? Let me know if you've tried that one and what you thought of this one. Shoulder rests can be quite complicated. I think they a lot of people just don't get on with them because they just don't fit their shoulder, they don't fit the violin. Just for some reason nobody just seems to make really good shoulder rests, but this is the only one I found to be comfortable. But some people can say it's sort of a little bit sort of too rigid, but you know, it's sort of the lesser of two evils really. But why don't you try without one? I don't have a shoulder rest. I've never had a shoulder rest on my violin, and I would never play with a shoulder rest. For me, because I don't have a lot of space between my shoulder and kind of, you know, my jawline there, when the violin goes on, I know I've got shoulder pads in here, but generally my shoulder doesn't have to come up too much for my violin to kind of stay on like this. So I just find a shoulder rest. If I've got a shoulder rest on, the violin's up here and I'm playing a little bit too, I feel like I can't move the violin. When I'm playing, I just can't get into it because the violin is stuck up in the sky and I don't like it. So if you are finding a shoulder rest not comfortable, then absolutely play without a shoulder rest. There is no stigma attached to that. Many world famous violinists don't play with a shoulder rest. So don't ever feel like playing without a shoulder rest is just, it's frowned upon. It's not. You can do whatever you like. It's never done me any harm. Okay. Do we have time for just a couple more just before we go? Cara, I performed Star Spangled Banner in front of 100 co-workers Veterans Day. I was shaking so bad and messed up twice. I thought I knew. Yeah, I mean, if you get to a point where you can play the piece of music and the music is just really not the problem, then you have to then just get over your nerves. And the only way you're going to do that is just to do it more and more. I think, as well as, you know, I'm not saying that if you can nail a piece of music and you can play it 1,000,000,000 times and never make a mistake, and then as soon as you get out on stage, the whole thing falls to pieces, that's you. That's a mental thing. That's something you have to get over. That's a zone that you have to get over in front of people. And I think you've got to remember, I think part of it is that we all sit here and we all think that everybody's judging us, don't we? Everybody's looking at my hair, you know, are people thinking that my eyeshadow doesn't look right, my eyebrow, you know, everybody is, we always think everybody's judging everybody else, but more often than not, people just aren't. They're just getting on with it. So if you are playing in front of 100 people for Veterans Day, how many of those actually play the violin? How many of those 100 play the violin? Maybe one or two. How many of that one or two, let's say 5 out of 100, let's say 5%, out of those 5, how many people play at your level? out of those 5, how many people are professional? So how many people like me would be sitting in the audience? Probably the chances of that would, I mean, no one. So who's judging you? Because the only people that are going to be looking at you are probably people that can't even play the violin. And to be quite frank, if they can't play it, you're already 100 times better than them. But for some reason in our heads, we think that everybody's a professional and everybody's out there and they're judging us. But they're not, because one thing you have to remember is that people that don't play an instrument think that very basic stuff is really well done and complicated. I used to back in the day think that the more complicated I made things, or the more difficult piece I chose to play, the more impressed people were. But then actually I found that the easier and the more simplistic the piece was that I played, in terms of me, playing something very basic and beginner, for example, people would love it just as well, and they'd be so impressed with it. Whereas to me, it's like, oh, I nailed that piece 15 years ago and I can play it in my sleep. But to them, because they don't play it, it's complicated. So I think we kind of get worked up by thinking that the audience is there judging us and everyone can play, but they can't. And out of those 100 people, maybe 1 or 2 would even play the violin, and out of those 1 or 2, they're going to be dabbling anyway, so they're just going to be marveling at you in awe anyway, and everybody else that doesn't play is also going to be marveling in awe at you. So there's no reason, if you think about it like that, that can just, I think that helped me just to get over that little kind of thing there. So yeah, it's a difficult one though. I think that's everything with the questions. So that's good. I'm going to cut it there. If any more come in, I will just note them down and I'll pass them on to next week's. Should we do another Q&A next week? Let me know if you want a Q&A next week. If you've got any questions, you can always leave them underneath the next week's video. So I'll schedule another video up for next Friday, and you can put questions in there or under any video. It doesn't really matter. But yeah, if you want, we can do another Q&A. I like doing the Q&As actually, because I don't know, it just answers all the questions, doesn't it, that you guys just can't get a simple answer for unless you're actually talking to a professional and getting feedback from. So if you want, we can do another Q&A. So yeah, let's do that next week. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. It was lovely to see you all again. Same time next week. I'll have a quick look to see if I've missed any questions. I'm sorry if I have, but I'll move them over to next week's live stream. Thank you very much for watching, and yeah, I will see you next week. Have a good weekend, everyone.